So now that you've done your podcast for a while, what has surprised you about the comments, feedback, um, you know, reflections that you've received from people?
I try not surprisingly, I try not to really dive too much into the comments and feedback, but the most pleasing feedback that's come has been from someone completely unknown to me, or individuals completely unknown to me who stumbled upon the podcast. However, people stumble upon podcasts, and then took time to reach out to say whether they reached out to me personally or found me on the interwebs and sent me a message saying how much they liked it. Those comments always were very touching to me. And that there's people who want to listen to it.
Yeah.
That's impressed me the most.
It must also be fulfilling to dispense this information in like kind of in chunks where people can learn about Afghanistan's cultural heritage without having to like sit with a giant book or you know, take a whole class at Cornell, or no, not Cornell, probably Columbia. So yeah, I mean, this is like you've done quite a service for our community.
Oh, thank you for saying that. But the podcast, we really decided early on that it was not going to be like a history lesson or an art history lesson. So there's a lot of information about the sites that we talk about that I never mention, because for people who are, they really want to dive in, there's a lot of library books and things available on the internet that could provide more historical information. Not so much Wikipedia. I don't always recommend that as a go-to source, but so it's intended to be kind of maybe a primer for people who are interested in the topic.
Yeah, I think I definitely Googled a few things after listening to some of the podcast episodes. So yeah, I mean, it's a really great introductory to your experiences in Afghanistan. And it's kind of like I love watching or taking classes with MasterClass. And and this kind of felt this similar way to me, although now MasterClass has become a lot more instructive, but you kind of get into a subject matter, learn a lot about it through somebody's personal experiences, and then you can go and venture more into it. So if anybody wonders about Monuments Woman and whether it's worth their time, like listen to 3 episodes, you're going to be totally hooked. So among your listeners, if there's somebody who's interested in getting into the field of cultural heritage preservation, what would you recommend to them?
Oh gosh. Well, I'm hesitating because, I mean, there's great need globally for heritage protection. So the need is out there. Unfortunately, there are not many jobs in that field. And maybe the need will then eventually create more opportunities for jobs. But I would say this for anybody who was thinking about pursuing a career, whether it's heritage preservation or anything that might be on their mind, to really want to do it in their heart first and foremost. It's not a job to aspire to get wealthy, but that it's a job that can be immensely gratifying if one can find a job doing it. So my advice is really, it's not very concrete. It's just one has to really want to work in heritage preservation to, I think, to succeed in heritage preservation.
Yeah, I think that's sound advice considering we both have children who are in the process of deciding. I like how you're like, there aren't that many jobs out there. So if you want to make a living, yeah, I agree. I do think that there's this whole an movement of people wanting to, find what they're passionate about and such. But and I think that for those people, whether it's doctors or archaeologists or whatever, I guess there's that pull that no matter which way you go and you try to be logical and get a job that pays well and there's lots of availability, you kind of get pulled back into what you're excited about. But I guess you can also, have a career that pays well and still sort of dabble in the knowledge and understanding and advocacy,
Absolutely.
volunteering, and sharing information.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. And just another sort of call to reality in heritage preservation that 84% of the work is paperwork.
Wow.
And research and communication, and only the other 16% is really hands-on preservation work. So it's not quite an equal balance of, like, you and I and our moving around Ghazni minarets, but for that half a day or a full day that we spent there were, days and days and days of preparation and learning and preparing materials and communication and, just on your side, but also sort of as someone who was there to help represent Afghanistan's heritage for your delegation. So yes, a lot of paperwork, a lot of emails, a lot of communication, and a lot of research involved.
Well, clearly you were good at that because that whole trip seemed so seamless. And I think in a war zone to have something like that go seamless, there's a lot of work, a lot of preparation. So,
there was a whole team. There was a whole team. Yeah.
Yes, that's true. There were a lot of great people. Is there something that you want to share to our viewers that you had hoped would come up and I didn't ask you about?
So my hope is that you've really asked great questions, but if there's one thing that I hope people will be inspired to continue to pay attention to what's happening to Afghanistan's heritage and world heritage in general, and advocate for its protection, because I do believe that it really belongs to all humanity. And while, each nation has its own sovereignty to take care of its heritage, but it really is very much shared. And so its protection needs everybody's involvement.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you. Thank you for saying that, because as an Afghan, I'm always kind of struggling as to like which part of the issue am I going to focus on? Is it like the Afghan women, the children, the cultural heritage and such? But I think there are so many things that we could do, and this is a really important part of our as Afghans, Afghan Americans, part of our history, and the existence of the country and a lot of the things that are happening today. So it is important for us, whether we're in the diaspora or in Afghanistan. And I really appreciate you sharing your experiences and like shedding this very like friendly, like approachable information that, anybody could absorb and learn something about, and then end up appreciating, Afghanistan for something beyond the war.
Yes. But I have a question for you, if I
Yeah.
may.
Yes.
So as an Afghan American, tell me what, in your mind and through your life experience, what do you consider the hallmarks or sort of the most defining elements of Afghanistan's heritage? And it doesn't have to be limited to Ghazni minarets, for example. It could be it could be dance. It could, what, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what for you are the hallmarks, the sort of defining characteristics of Afghanistan's heritage?
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good question. I mean, honestly, until I went on that trip and I met you, I didn't really think beyond just the Buddhas of Bamyan and the Ghazni minarets, because the minarets I knew from. And then secondarily, there's a lot of the religious sites that Afghans go to, that has a historical context, but also religious, and those I knew a little bit more about, partially because I would go to some of them in Kabul, like the Shahid Shamsiri Wali. But for me personally, I would say food and Afghan carpets, both of which I actually integrate in my life here in San Francisco. I mean, you've been to my house. I love Afghan carpets. I have them all over the place. And I write a blog about Afghan food. And so it's not ancient history in any way, but I feel like, to me, that's more of a daily ritual and reflection of what we had in Afghanistan and how my parents grew up, that I can, recreate. But I would say all the exposure I've had about Afghanistan's history and through the cultural heritage sites has been through you. So
that's an honor.
And by through you, I mean in the sense that, we've had all these conversations over the years. I met you then, we have stayed in touch. I read all the things that you create and interview for. You've shared books with me that, I've perused through, and therefore I learned about, sites, in a deeper way. So that's what I mean.
So I love your answer for all the reasons. Well, first, the answer comes from you, but you named two such strong cultural traditions of textiles, carpet, which are so distinctive based on, all tribes and regional affiliation and sort of familial traditions. And you mentioned cuisine. And the first thing that comes to mind when you mention those are the keepers of those traditions are women. And they are really the cultural keepers of these strong Afghan traditions. And I think that's another element that often doesn't get thought about enough, how important women's roles are in keeping Afghan culture alive and being these sort of generational communicators of these strong cultural traditions. So I would agree, food and carpets too are two hallmarks of Afghan culture.
That's a really insightful observation. I mean, partially the reason I got into Afghan or preserving my family's stories about food and my mom's cooking was around 10 years ago. I was on a flight and I was thinking, oh, all week my sister and I talked about food. And then I realized I'm not a good cook. I don't really know anything about Afghan food. And that all of that knowledge resides with my mom. And, at that time she was 75. And I thought, oh, when she passes on, this information is going to go with her. And a week later, I was in her kitchen with my friend who's a food writer, and we started getting her recipes, and we're following her around the kitchen, measuring everything, asking her about her experiences with food. And so thanks. I just thought about all that, and what a nice memory of that time with my mom. And I mean, Afghan women are so incredibly strong and resilient, and such an important part of the society in so many ways, that we just, it's just not reflected in some of the things that we learn about Afghanistan in the West. So, but anyone who's met an Afghan woman knows I mean, you got bullied into putting makeup on for that polo by Afghan women, going, wait, you can't go on screen like this.
Right. I was like decked out in makeup, ready for an Afghan wedding. And you know what that makeup looks like.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I really had no say in the matter. So
that was on Tolo TV? You were being
it was on, what was it? Ariana. It was Ariana TV.
Okay. Yeah. You told me when you arrived, the women gasped, really? You're gonna go on like this?
I was so slow to get the hint of, the way I was not acceptable. We had to fix that. So.
Well, I have to say, that's the other thing. I mean, we Afghan women, we love makeup and clothes, and I guess, and jewelry and all that. Yeah. So that all of that fashion is really a big part of our cultural heritage. Even the pieces that they fab, the Bactrian gold. I mean, there was a lot of beautiful jewelry and such. So, well, I'm happy that at least we imposed our culture on you once. And it's been really, really wonderful talking to you, Laura John. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, Humaira John. Love talking with you.
So I was curious, what was it like chatting with George over 28 episodes about your life experience and point of view and steps, and whether you like soup or your husband likes soup? Give us a little glimpse into what that was like in creating this podcast.
Well, so it never felt George is an old friend, so we already had this warm affection and rapport with each other. And George has such a natural way of listening and asking questions in such a way to make someone feel comfortable and to draw out information. That's really one of his superpowers. So when we would record, I didn't really consider it recording. George and I were having a conversation, and it just happened to be on Zoom, and because it was COVID era anyway, so everything was on Zoom. And I would just turn off my little camera on Zoom so I didn't see myself, and I would just look at George as if he and I were talking. And in the podcast, you hear an edited version of things that we talked about, but all the sort of off-color things we said, or the, not fit for prime time words we used, or our venting, and all those asides, which might have been entertaining for listeners, but weren't really appropriate for the podcast, those got edited out. But recording with George was fantastic. It was like talking to a friend every week.
Oh, how fun.
Yeah.
Are you going to miss it?
No.
Okay. Laura, thank you so much for talking to me today. It was lovely to see you and to catch up, and hopefully next time it'll be in person.
I hope so too. It's so great to see you, Humaira. I consider having met you in Afghanistan one of the highlights of my work there.
Oh my gosh, that's so
yeah.
Thank you so much.
Truly, and that our friendship has persisted all these years. It's been a gift of having worked in Afghanistan. So thanks to you for, for all you do
Thank
to, represent the community, to share your knowledge so openly and with the inspiration to have people understand Afghanistan more holistically.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And that means a lot to me coming from you.
Oh.
So thank you for watching our video. And we hope that you will listen to Monuments Woman and give us some feedback on what you think about the podcast.
Bye.
Bye.